let's get to Steve's tender conscience dilemma, shall we? He wrote, "What is the best way to keep a tender conscience? I'm afraid my conscience is not what it once was." Steve, that is excellent. Your conscience shouldn't be what it once was. It should be maturing, and sometimes that can cause some confusion. You get saved, and you think doing this is a sin. But 5 years later, you find yourself doing that very thing that you used to think was a sin. Now, this is where it can get tricky, but this is where the Christian faith is brilliant. You need to work through biblically, with wise counselors, prayerfully asking for wisdom to discern, is this activity sinful or is it permitted? In other words, is it an issue of the conscience? Steve, there's every possibility that something you used to think was a sin wasn't a sin. This is what Romans 14 is all about. 1 Corinthians 8 through 10 tackles this subject. I really feel like eating this meat sacrificed to an idol is a sin. Paul says, then it is a sin for you and you can't violate your conscience. But as you mature and grow, you're going to learn it's just meat. What was done to it was nothing because there's nothing behind that pagan practice. And you'll have liberty to eat that meat. That means you're maturing. It doesn't mean your conscience is growing cold, but that's not to say your conscience isn't growing cold. 4 thoughts for your consideration. Number 1, it may not be. Your conscience might not be growing cold. It might be maturing. And that's a good thing, a normal thing. And number 2, we should always have a tender conscience. Don't use number 1 to go, que sera, I can pretty much do anything I want to. Yeah, it troubles me a little bit, but I'm probably just immature. We should always strive to have a tender conscience. The question, of course, is how do you get one? The answer, by staying in the Word, by reading the Word, by hearing good biblical sermons. Having theological knowledge will rightly inform your conscience. Remember, you're taking a conscience that's pretty much dead. It still works a little bit, kind of an angel and a demon on your shoulder before you got saved. But now, once you're saved, God starts to really mature that and grow that and fix that conscience so that it identifies quickly, oh, that's a sin. Run. Danger, Will Robinson. Or can say, hey, God is good, and I can enjoy that activity. Feel a bit of tension? Thought number 3 regarding your conscience. As we mature, some things will no longer trouble us because they are not sinful. And number 4, as we mature in our relationship with the Lord, your conscience may still be tender, but your emotional response is different. Let me explain that, Lucy. Let's say you first got saved. You see a fill-in-the-blank sin, and it causes you to go, oh, that's disgusting. I hate that sin. 5 years later, you've been growing in the Lord. You still believe that fill-in-the-blank is a sin. But when you're confronted with it, you don't have that same visceral response. That doesn't mean your conscience isn't tender. It simply means you're having a different emotional response. Don't confuse your emotions with your conscience itself, which is not an emotional center. It is a thinking center that is informed by the Word to increasingly convict, or don't forget the converse. We tend to think Christian liberty and issues of the conscience, it's all about the don't. Well, it's about the don't, but it's also about the you can. The negative side of the conscience is the more it gets informed, the more you're going to realize this area is a sin. Oops, I shouldn't be thinking like that. And that is good and profitable. But don't forget, the issue of conscience is also to grow you in maturity so that you can enjoy the Christian liberties that Jesus purchased for you.